Welcome to everybody who has joined this digital leadership webinar, and thank you all for doing so. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Jade Wysocki and I'm one of the programme managers here at Imperial's Exec Education Division. I'm joined by Nelson Phillips, a professor at the college. Nelson will talk about what digital transformation is and the sorts of effects it is having on individuals, organisations and industries. Nelson will touch on some of the new leadership skills that are increasingly needed by leaders who want to lead during and following the digital transformation of their organisation. Additionally, touching on 4 digital technologies that are fundamentally changing organisations: big data, blockchain, AI and robotics, and in the process creating new challenges for leaders. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar using the questions box. Nelson will try and answer all of them at the end of the webinar. I'm now going to hand over to Nelson, who will introduce himself.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for joining us. It's really great to have the opportunity to chat about this. It's something I think is an incredibly important topic in organizations right now, both the impact of digital transformation and also the impact that has on leaders. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to having a conversation about this. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes or so and go through some what I think are hopefully engaging and thought-provoking insights and things that I've been thinking about and things that I've heard from the companies that I've been working with. And then, of course, we'll have some time at the end for a discussion, for you to ask whatever questions you want to take this in whatever direction you'd like to go. Of course, do just type questions whenever you have them, and don't want you to miss any, so we'll come back to that. They'll be kept here on the screen for me, and I can give you an answer, or do my best to give you an answer at the end. Okay. Oops. Oh, there we are. Okay. A little bit about me. I'm a professor here at Imperial College Business School. I teach mostly leadership. I also teach stuff on digital business, and I also teach a little bit of stuff on innovation. And I'm really interested in actually fundamentally where people and technology come together. So my first degree was in computer engineering, and I spent several years as a computer programmer working for IBM and then working for startups, but then became increasingly interested in questions around strategy, and basically in a startup, how do you create a business model, as we would say now, and it ended up going back and taking my MBA and eventually my PhD, and really realized that most of the interesting technology problems actually occur where technology and people bump into each other, and that actually for me the most interesting problems are the ones that involve people, and often people not doing what you expect them to do when technologies appear on the scene. So basically, I'm a geek, interested in leadership and strategy, and if you want to test yourself on your how much of a geek you are, do you know what that yellow thing is in the lower right hand of the slide? And if you do you know how to use one? Because that's a slide rule, and that's a sure sign that you're a geek. So see whether your degree of geekness. So let's talk a little bit about this whole question of what's happening with digital transformation and leadership. What I want to talk about, I guess, is in 2 phases. I'll talk quite briefly about what digital transformation is. This is a big topic. There's lots of stuff out there talking about what's happening, and I think it's really important. And then even more interesting, I think, is what it means for you as a leader. So what does it mean that your organization is being transformed, that your industry is being transformed, that society is being transformed by digital technologies taking over and doing new things, and also doing things we used to do in the past with people or just with paper, now being done by computers. What does that mean? What does this digital transformation thing mean for you as a leader? So that's the 2 topics: a bit about digital transformation, and then really focusing on what that means for you as a leader. So what is digital transformation? Well, let's start with the word transformation. I mean, we used this word once before when we were talking about another earlier transformation. So there was a lot of stuff written. Here's an example by a gentleman named Carl Poliani, a very famous book called The Great Transformation. But it was about a previous transformation, and that's kind of the one from the guy in the top left to the technology in the middle of the screen. That was the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution was the last time we had something that was so widespread, pervasive, and fundamentally changing the way society operates. And this, of course, was a whole set of things. It was in the Industrial Revolution. It was a time when we, sort of went from animals as a main source of power, from agrarian kind of lifestyle to working in factories, working in offices, driving cars. Fundamental technology might be the assembly line. A car, of course, is one of Henry Ford's early Model Ts. And this was really a fundamental transformation of society. And what was interesting, if you look at Europe, especially, for several hundred years before that, the lifestyle, the way people lived, grandparents and grandchildren, their lives were indistinguishable. The way they worked, the way they learned, the way they found their mates, the way they lived their lives were basically the same. Queens and kings came and went, borders moved, there were wars, but the way people lived was fundamentally the same. The Industrial Revolution, there was a period where grandparents and grandchildren, their lives were completely different. There was this transformation of society, what Karl Polanyi called the Great Transformation. So this was the last time that this happened. And now, arguably, this is happening again. We're in the middle of something which is as profound as that transformation from the agrarian society to modern industrial society. And this time, there's a picture of a Tesla. This looks like a car. It looks like a Model T. But of course, in many ways, it's the most important part of this car is actually the software. This is a car, but it's a car where that is most of its functionality comes from a computer program and digital processors that execute the code. And my friend who has one, he gets very excited every time there's an update of his car's operating system and of his car's software, because suddenly his car has new capabilities. I mean, this certainly never happened with the Model T. If the Model T started doing something new, it was because it was broken. Now you have a car that, once a month gets a software update and suddenly has new features. That's a completely different kind of thing. And the skills and capabilities, the organizational competencies that are required, the kinds of technologies that go into it, and actually the lifestyle built around this new kind of object, this operating system and software built into a car is a fundamentally, again, different transfer. We're not with digital transformation, industrial transformation 150 years ago, now a digital transformation, again, fundamentally changing the world, and a very important challenge for leaders. And I'll talk through that in a minute. How does this affecting society? Well, you're all very familiar with these things. It's how we shop. Amazon has transformed our shopping habits. The high streets are disappearing. Shopping malls in the US are closing down. People have just changed the way they buy things and the way they interact with markets. Anyone who makes any consumer goods has to do it, through the web, and this fundamental change. The one on the bottom right, this is people on holidays. They're at Niagara Falls, but I thought this was very funny because instead of looking at the falls, not one of them is actually looking at the falls. They're all either taking a picture of each other with their phones, taking a picture of the falls, or looking at the other one, people taking pictures. So there's no one actually looking at the thing they came to see. This is a transformation of people's habits. Suddenly what's important is what's Instagrammable, what can you put on Facebook, what can you show your friends. Complete change in how our social relationships are function. Bottom left, that's of course Tinder, changing how we date. We're now in a time in our life. I remember what time if you met on social media, if you met on one of the early dating websites, that you didn't tell anyone. Now people celebrate it. 40% of weddings in the United States begin with people meeting on some form of social media. This is a fundamental change in how we date and how we find mates. And every sector of society, this transformation has happened, and it very important ways is changing who we are as human beings. Of course, not all of this is fun and good. There's many problems, and this is very important to keep in mind when we're thinking about leadership. Everything from the problems they're having with bike sharing in China. This is a pile of bikes outside of a train station in China, to riots about Uber on the bottom left, to problems with Airbnb and fake news. All these kind of challenges, new ethical and moral challenges to how to deal with this new technology and its impact on us. This is critical and central to the challenges for leaders, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Of course, for industries, this is really fundamental. Here's a quote from a CEO of Accord Hotels, and I like how he says it. He says, He didn't even say transformation. He says mutation, right? Because for his company, there's been a change, a couple changes, a couple of new players that never existed, a couple types of new companies have appeared in his industry that never existed before. Of course, in his case, it's Airbnb and Booking.com who have completely changed the way his industry works. The old competencies and resources that made his company very successful are losing value because some of these companies, Airbnb providing competition and Booking.com inserting themselves between his company and their customers, are completely mutating, using his words, the industry in which he's trying to build and grow and maintain his company, and causing him huge problems. And this company still, is struggling to figure out how to really prosper in this, what he uses the word mutation, because for him it's negative, this transformed industry. And he's a leader that talks a lot about how to try to deal with this, but he still hasn't really figured it out if you have a look at the company. So what does this mean then? We have a society being transformed, which also is changing people. We have the whole idea of millennials. So anyone who's born, people who've been born since the internet has appeared, who grew up with the internet, they're this new generation. They're different. We have people, sort of these new challenges in society, new business models, new kinds of opportunities. We have these technologies coming into our organizations, changing how we work. So suddenly you have a team where one of your team members is an AI system. What does that mean? What does that mean for you as a leader? Well, when we think about leaders, for many, many years, we've talked about competencies. So leaders need sets of competencies. If they have those competencies in place, they're able to do these particular things, right? Their leadership skills and behaviors that contribute to superior performance. They have those in place, they'll be successful. These are the skills and behaviors that will lead to success in leadership positions. And we had an idea what those were, and here's a list, sort of a summary list drawing on a bunch of different authors and different websites, and things like social intelligence, things like courage, conflict management. And what's interesting about digital transformation of organizations, of industries, of society, is that I don't think any of these are any less important. So you still need, if you want to be successful as a leader at any level in an organization, these are important. Emotional intelligence or interpersonal skills are no less important now than they were 20 years ago. They're no less important because of the appearance of the internet. These are all still important. The challenge for leaders has just gotten more significant. There's more things you need to be able to do now. So in addition to all of these things that, and we already know are important for leaders, and you can sort of think for yourself which of these are things that you're more skilled at, which of these things are maybe your things that you're currently struggling with or you're trying to build, and which ones you haven't maybe even thought about yet, but they're all kind of very familiar things. But the digital transformation of society, of organizations, of industries, actually adds some new ones. And these new technologies are creating organizations with new challenges. So what would those be? What do those look like? Well, I think it's quite useful just to divide them into three categories. And when I think about them, I think there's three kinds of new competencies, three kind of boxes into which there's new competencies you need to build as a manager. And I divide those up into technological competencies, organizational competencies, and ethical competencies. And I'll go through each of them quickly, and then you can ask me any questions that you have. Technological competencies, well, what does that mean? Well, I think there's a set of technologies that are going to impact every organization. These are ones that are changing the way we organize. So we've already went through a phase where the internet and other technologies have impacted manufacturing. They've impacted how we sell. So we all have websites now that commerce, you can buy things, and every organization has some sort of website, many of them where you can buy whatever it is that they sell or engage with them around services. And that's kind of gone quite a long ways towards making much of commerce, e-commerce, making much of this sort of external activities of companies digital. But what's increasingly happening is that these four technologies are changing the nature of how we organize, how people work together, how people solve problems in organizations. And as leaders, you need to at least have a basic competency in these 4 technologies. There's maybe other ones that are important, but these 4 are ones that are going to change the way work is done in your organization. So big data, AI, robotics, and blockchain. I'm not saying you need to be an expert. I'm not saying you need to know how to do big data analysis, or you need to know how to program AI, or that you need to know how to set up a blockchain system. I'm just saying you need to have enough competency and enough understanding of these 4 things that you can talk to experts and that you can make sensible decisions about these things. So you need a familiarity with these things. Doesn't mean you need to be in any way experts, just need to understand what it means and what these things are useful for and what they're not, so that experts don't confuse you or cause you to make an error. Right? I think you also need to understand what disruption is. So this idea is everywhere. The idea that industries are being disrupted by new technologies, the idea that companies are going out of business because their core business has been disrupted. You need to, that term is really important. Digital technologies create lots of disruption, and I think understanding that, in addition to your general understanding of strategy, is very important. This is a new aspect of strategy that you need to understand. So having some understanding of that, and it's not very complex, but you need to really understand, what does disruption mean, which things are disruption and which things are just competitive. There's always been competition. Disruption is different than competition. What does it mean? You also need, in your technological toolkit, is to have some sense of what platform strategies are about. Much digital business is done on platforms, and understanding what platform strategies look like, how they work, and why some people win and some people lose is an important part of being competent as a leader, to understand what's happening with your organization's strategy and with your industry. So if you think about Amazon as a platform, right? Lots of companies, platforms are just companies whose business is about connecting 2 sides. In the case of Amazon, companies selling goods and people buying goods. Amazon's in the middle, they make money out of that. There's many, many of these platforms, and understanding platform strategies is an important part of your toolkit. In many ways, these are really quite easy. It takes a little bit of time. There's lots of resources out there, everything from TED Talks to all kinds of websites explaining these things. But you do need to do it. You do need to make sure you're up to date and understand these things, and these are in your leadership toolkit, your set of competencies, because I think these technological competencies are important for everyone who's leading in organizations, whatever level. A bit more challenging, perhaps, than those is some organizational competencies, the things that have to do with managing people in the organization. And there's a number of them, but I'd like to sort of 4 of them I think are particularly important. The first one is, I think, one thing we know about the people that are currently entering the workforce is that they are incredibly concerned about their development. They respond extremely well to being provided with development opportunities. They want to develop very quickly. They have high expectations. Also, we're increasingly, the work we do, the part that people do, as automation, as AI, as all these things come into the workplace, means that the work people do, we need to have people who are high capacity, who are very capable. So leaders, more and more, you need to spend your time making sure your people are really, really as doing the best work in that the highest level you can. And the way to do that is to coach them, to help them develop as people, to make sure that they're moving ahead and that they're able to take on the tasks and challenges that are coming along with these technologies. Second, I think an interesting one, I usually would spend more time on this, but we don't have so much time today. This whole idea of millennials and whatever the next generation after that is coming into the workplace is creating a really interesting dynamic, especially as people are working later and later. The fact that we're living longer means people work later in life. People are staying on after what used to be the normal retirement age, and you have these very different younger people coming into the organization. So you have generational difference. And even more than we've ever had before. We have today, many organizations have 4 generations in the workplace. So understanding generational diversity, understanding tools for managing generational diversity becomes really key to being a successful leader. Third, you need to understand how to create an innovation culture. No matter what area of the organization you're in, you need to be able to create a culture that supports innovation, and a lot of that is about experimentation. We now know, we've heard lots about lean startups, lean entrepreneurship, but those principles of experimentation also work in established large companies, trying to figure out how to create an innovation culture, a culture that allows people to make mistakes, but actually rewards only people who do good experiments and who take good risks and that we learn from is a challenge, and it's an approach. It requires a particular approach to leadership, and I think that's really important. How do you develop an innovation culture is a question you need to be able to answer. And I think increasingly leadership is about creating teams that can go off and accomplish things without the leader. So creating self-managing teams. I think that's a another important organizational competence. How do you create a team, empower them, give them tasks? How do you be the sort of leader that gets people motivated and create a team that can go off and solve this without the direct intervention of the leader? That's the way people expect to work, and also that's the kind of team that's going to be able to solve the sorts of problems that are appearing for organizations today. Finally, and I think this is the most difficult one, we have a challenge around new ethical problems. Just like these technology creating new problems for society, they're also creating lots of new organizational problems. If we look at Facebook and Mr. Zuckerberg, we see a leader who's struggling with a whole bunch of these ethical issues which have been created by the technology that they've created. So Facebook has created privacy issues that never existed before because no one ever had this kind of information on people before. There wasn't an opportunity to spread mistruths in the same way. So he's struggling with ethical problems that no one's ever had to solve before. Similarly, driverless cars, there's new problems around how you make decisions about how the car should react to certain situations. What do you do? How do you make these decisions between whether you hit a pedestrian or risk the well-being of people in the car? How do you make these decisions? So there's all these, and depending on your company, what your company does, what kind of technologies you're bringing into the company, these ethical issues will be different. So I can't give you a list, but there's issues always around privacy, around fairness. So we know artificial intelligence systems very often have the ones that learn from previous decisions that humans have made often pick up very bad habits. So we have lots of, for example, decisions being made by AI systems about loan applications where biases around ethnicity or around gender that were in the decisions of the humans that were involved previously appear even stronger in the system. And you need to figure out, how do you manage this? How do you make sure that these digital systems, these AI systems, or whatever, are representing the culture and values of your organization? How do you do that? These are the kinds of questions around ethics and morality that you really need to have some answers to, or at least some ways to think about. Right? And this is the other third area of challenge for leaders in this new digital organizations that are appearing. I had some stuff there. Okay, so there it is: ethics of decision making, privacy, and the ethics of exponentiality. I think this is also another one that catches many companies, or many leaders in many companies, is that the impacts of their decisions are multiplied so rapidly and to such an extent that you have to be very careful about decision making to understand what is going to happen when this is multiplied by the dynamics of these digital networks. What's the exponential nature of the kind of systems we're creating? What does this mean for the decisions we make? Another big challenge for leaders. So if you're interested in these kind of things and these topics, these are exactly the topics that we're covering in a leadership program that I run that's coming up in July. So if you're interested, we're going to be spending a week, 5 days, going more deeply into exactly these issues. What's leadership in this new digital world? How are various digital technologies impacting organizations, and what does that mean for leaders, and what are some solutions to some of these problems? So if you're interested in that, please have a look at the website or contact us, and we're very happy to talk about it. But we'll be dealing much more with any of these issues, and if you're interested in that, it'd be great to have you along. I'll have a lot more time, and we'll have a lot more time to engage in these things and to try to think through what leadership skills, competencies you need in terms of these traditional competencies, and then in terms of the challenges of the new digital organization. All right? Okay. here's a bit more information on the course. Benefits for you, benefits for the organization. I think the course we've been offering for the last several years, and it's really a great way if you're interested in leadership development, especially if you're feeling challenged by some of the new technologies and new digital technologies, that you can come and work with us on some of these things, leave with some solutions, and at least having spent a lot of time thinking through your own kind of approach to these things, adding new things to your toolkit, and being able to leave with some friends who are interested in the same topic. So you're more than welcome to join us. If you're interested in this, please get in contact. That's all timetable. Okay, so thank you very much. It's been really interesting talking. Do you guys, if you have any questions, any other questions, please feel free to type away, and I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. So let me know any questions.
Okay, we've got one that's come through, Nelson. Somebody said that they're really interested in the topic of crucial conversations that they've seen on the website as one of the sessions, and just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think the crucial conversations question is really about difficult conversations that need to be had. I think one of the mistakes people make is that there's a lot of difficult conversations appear all over in leadership practice. So you have people who are difficult to deal with. You have conversations that are difficult to have, but they're not always necessary to have. So the session that we have in the program is really about recognizing, when do we have to have a conversation? If we don't have to have a conversation, what are the other alternatives? And then if we have to have this kind of difficult but crucial conversation, how do we best organize the conversation to reduce conflict and increase the chances of being able to come to the right kind of helpful results. So I think this is something all leaders, I certainly know when I was a leader, when I was a leader, myself, I was a dean of the business school for a couple of years. This question of difficult conversations takes up a lot of time and a lot of energy, and you want to really have a toolkit for dealing with that, and that's what we do in this session on the course. And it's one of the ones I think I find the most interesting to deliver, because talking to the class, talking to the participants about their experience and their kind of approach to how to deal with these kinds of crucial conversations is really interesting and helpful. And hearing different examples of how people have been successful has been really is always really interesting. So I really enjoy that kind of crucial conversation session. Let's answer that.
And somebody else has just asked if the recording can be made available to share with colleagues. Yes, it can be, and that's something that we can email through to all of you within the next few days.
Okay, great. And as I said, feel free to type in any other questions. So we have a couple other questions here. There's a question in terms of the program about coaching. And coaching elements in the program. So the program we have has a major element about coaching as a leadership skill. So it's not so much having a traditional coach come in and coach you. It's about teaching the participants on the course how to coach others and help others with their development, and it's done in the class with the participants in the class coaching each other, which is really, I think, a pretty interesting and profound experience for many people. And I think in the kind of organizations that people increasingly find themselves in as digital transformation moves forward, but also just as cultural change moves forward, the idea of sort of coaching and helping others develop is a more and more powerful leadership skill. People that can coach their teams, coach individuals on their teams, help people to move forward in their development, are people that people want to be around, and people want to be on their teams, because you very rapidly people understand whether they have an opportunity to develop, and if they do, those are the leaders they want to follow. So I think increasingly this idea of coaching as a leadership style, coaching is really valuable in terms of having a coach, but actually coaching as a leadership style in the kinds of organizations that I spend a lot of time working with, that skill is becoming more and more important. Top-down kinds of leadership style is less and less appreciated, less and less effective. And what's more and more effective is creating these empowered teams and coaching individuals and teams to be excellent. And so that's a big part of the program. And I think that's needs to be a big part of your leadership skill, your leadership toolkit, no matter what you do and where you work.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for those questions and for the insight there, Nelson. That's all the time we have. If you